I'm doing right.
Yes, but I started the broadcast, so hello,
Yeah,
hello, and welcome to Kiss and
hello.
Tell magazine. You've got Dr. Sabrina Rojek, Dr. Jenny with us. We've
Mhm.
got Ava Ashe today with
Welcome,
us.
Ava.
Sorry?
Welcome, Ava.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thank you so
you.
much for being here with us today. I'm going to intro you real quick, and then we're just going to get right into it. Super
Awesome.
interesting stuff today, friends. So Ava's an authentic Tantra practitioner, also licensed in hypnotherapy and shamanic movement guide. It was a yoga practitioner moving from this, but working really in sexuality, spirituality, and what does it mean? What does Tantra mean? What does bringing spirituality into sexuality actually mean? And then not just from our Western sense, but then really from an Eastern and a Buddhist tradition of bringing the whole system online. So I'm really excited to have you, Ava, share on this topic because, as you said, and you'll get right into it earlier, we really do have a gap between this sexuality and spirituality. It's almost like, okay, God, stay outside the door, regardless of your beliefs. We have this thing. Please welcome, love, and excited to hear from you and with what you have to share and with what you know. And I will be quiet.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just begin with a little bit of my story. So I went to India, the thinking it's the birthplace of enlightenment, right? It's involved heavily in spirituality.
Yes.
And while I was there studying yoga, I really discovered a gap where we weren't really we weren't we weren't bringing in our sexuality. I'm like, we're in the body, we're learning the philosophy behind yoga. Where does my sexuality and pleasure fall into this?
Mm.
And I really left with no answers.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I have been heavily intrigued in my own sexuality from a very young age. So coming into that space where I thought all my questions were going to be answered, I was disappointed in that aspect. I felt like something was missing.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, I heard the word tantra being thrown around a lot, but still it was like a big taboo thing. Even in a place like India, it was very difficult to find the authenticity. So I ended up, picking up a book, and it was very horribly written, more like a sex manual than anything very tangible, right? And as I continued through my path, I fell into becoming an erotic dancer for a while. So, that was my way of showing up for my own sexual expression.
I love that.
But again, after a while, I was still left feeling unfulfilled in that aspect. So as I, continued really trying to develop what this conjunction of spirituality and sexuality was, I discovered the Institute of Authentic Tantra. So, this is heavily rooted in Tibetan Buddhist Tantra, but also in sexology and science. And we are heavily trauma informed. So going from not really knowing what the hell Tantra was to going into a space of, there was obviously an in between there when I was still figuring it out, like, what does this word mean? There's a lot of male practice in the world of Tantra. There's a lot, especially in the West, which I'll talk about more in a moment, is what we normally see of Neo Tantra. So, going back to the world of authentic Tantra, we are rooted in Tibetan Buddhist, alchemy. And this is an oral-based lineage from the Shangbakao lineage of, Tibetan Tantric Buddhism. And we also call it baby Vajrayana. I know in the spiritual community we've heard Vajrayana, but a lot of times the practices that we find are not very tangible. They're not very, easy to understand.
Doable.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really harness the five elements in this lineage, and it's so special and so unique because it is an unbroken lineage to this day, meaning it's an oral transmission of these teachings, which I have never found along my path. A lot of times what we see is that whatever the original teaching was manipulated in some way, whether it was religious institution or patriarchy or someone that who just, you know, didn't want to go there.
Right.
So it's unique in the way that we're still harnessing the ancient wisdom, the medicinal benefits of these practices, from all the other people that have also practiced, right? So this is a brand new tradition to the West. It wasn't introduced, I believe, until like the 90s. Um, so that's where I come in, right? Really, really blowing up what Tantra means in the West, and using it for holistic healing, and using a sexuality as a spiritual path.
So how do you use it? Do you see couples? Do you see individuals? What do you do with your practice, if you will?
Yeah, I work with individuals as well as couples, and a lot of I guess what we see in the West of being neo tantra based is that we jump straight into doing practices with a partner, like tantric sex, right? Which is wonderful, but we also need to develop our own sexual expression. We need to dissolve root traumas. We need to involve the subconscious mind on some level, right? We have to have an understanding of our anatomy. We have to have some kind of understanding of what's happening in our nervous system. There's so many points here. So, honestly, to jump straight into a sexual practice of that nature, of this power, this magnitude of moving sexual energy, potentially with someone that you maybe don't fully trust, or someone who also has very limited, you know, development in their embodiment of the practice, can be really, really dangerous and harmful. So that's really what separates the uniqueness of Tibetan Tantra, where I often will work with individuals, whether it's a couple coming to me, I will work with both of them. I will work individually with them and as a couple. So you're getting the best of both worlds. We have to understand what's going on in our own internal self and develop that sovereignty right before we invite our partner into that. And that's really what makes it so powerful and makes it so medicinal for ourselves, makes it tangible, is by working with ourselves on some level first, before we're just jumping straight into and talking about kundalini and raising all this sexual energy up the chakras, which in Tibetan Tantra we don't use those terms like kundalini and things like that. So it's a bit different. Because we use the elemental system. But just to give you a little bit of context, that's part of what deciphers, the Neo Tantra from an approach of authentic Tantra. Yeah.
There are so many good things that are in here. So first, I want to point out something and then ask a little bit more on how you do that. You just said develop sovereignty. And that there's lots of things that stuck out already on what's different from, again, traditional, what Americans often hear as far as what Tantra is. And it is all sex. There isn't any other thing to it, and we know that there's something different. So one, thank you for talking about all of the components to sexuality. That's that first piece, that it's not just go see a sex therapist or call somebody on the phone and say, hi, stuff's not working, or that you listed like 9 components, if not more, to to what the makeup of one's sexuality is. So I just wanted to pause there because that right there is what I think would catch up a lot of people, that they don't think about. It is involving every aspect of yourself. But you said develop sovereignty first. That is like when you're working with a couple and understanding what are all these components, actually touching on them. So what do you do? What does that mean to develop sovereignty besides the fact that I like that word? What does that mean? And then how do you do that with someone? Or, hey, I want that. What is
Yeah, I think that in Western spirituality, we tend to jump from, doing this one thing, and it's going to mean that we jump all the way to embodiment, like right away.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the thing with sexuality, when we weave that in, because it's one of our deepest, if not the deepest core wounding that we have,
Mm.
um, we're constantly looping back and forth between something that arises and then pure embodiment, right? And then, so it's developing that relationship to how we're viewing that, to which we view not only ourselves, but the world around us. And
Mm.
that's exactly what pleasure does. So when I take individuals or couples through my mentorship program, oftentimes we'll start with transformational therapy. I also call it subconscious reframing to really go into the subconscious on that level, because our subconscious is this huge memory bank that encompasses or makes up over 95% of our reality. So,
Mhm.
whatever we're seeing in our reality, whatever we're attracting in our reality, is a result of what is stored in our subconscious memory bank, right? Because everything is energy. Our subconscious is telling our body, right, certain signals all the time. It's in constant communication. So, even things like sexual dysfunction, oftentimes that's rooted in a core belief system or, something really, really deeply embedded there that that person is totally not consciously aware of. So, a lot of times I will start there depending on the person, and everything I do is so individualized,
Yeah.
really developed for, their goals, needs, and desires, because our sexuality is this huge thing, right? It's so
Mhm.
vast.
Yes.
And the sessions develop over time, right? We don't jump straight into sexual pleasure tools, right? Actually start with learning the fire element, for example, and igniting our sexual energy, developing a relationship with the elemental energy within us and outside of us. So just in that aspect, we're getting this medicinal dose of,
Mhm.
um, again, from all of the lineages or all the people that practice through that lineage. And then we have the knowledge component. So there's the sexology component coming in here, where I'm actually teaching you about your body, about your genitals. I'm teaching you why vulva owners can experience over 15 forms of orgasm, right? Why
Mhm.
is that possible? It's because you're erectile tissue, and here's the location, and here's how you might be able to stimulate it. So, a lot of times, again, what we think of as a sexual dysfunction, for example, like anorgasmia, I don't think that's a real thing. I think that that's truly a lack of
Oh,
knowledge, right?
yeah.
Developing
Mhm.
into a lack of sensation
Yep.
because of the trauma, right?
I agree.
Because of not knowing where to touch, not knowing how to voice our
Mhm.
needs. It all builds up.
Mhm.
There's so many layers, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, as I move through sessions with people, it develops over time to where, we do move into me teaching sexual pleasure tools. There's specific steps, and
Mhm.
then the embodiment starts to flow in from that space, right? Then they can start to explore. Then they can start to mix things up, right? I firmly believe that we need some kind of structure, right? Or some kind of framework before we just jump right into embodiment, because we tend to get lost. Or maybe we get a sense of this embodiment, this sense of sovereignty, the sense of um, um, God self, or we call it Buddha nature, right? Consciousness. But then it doesn't tend to stick, right? So developing these tools over time and with consistency, making it part of your everyday is really what I'm all about, making it tangible, making it accessible for people that know nothing about Tibetan Buddhism, know nothing about Tantra. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're at because it's for your Western body, it's for the Western mind. And I'm also incorporating all these other components, right? So.
Do you have, I'm curious, how do you have people resistant to what you're teaching them? I mean, because
Absolutely.
Western culture has us kind of, narrow-minded, if you will. So do you have, how do you work around that when you get that happening?
Yeah, obviously there is an aspect of someone who really wants it, really desires it, really willing to take, really willing to take on the practices, the tools. And I make that very clear that, it's all rooted in pleasure, but that doesn't mean it's going to be pleasurable the entire time. But I'm here to support you through any resistance that you're experiencing. So, already I can usually tell pretty well if someone is really just saying they want to go deep and really dive into their sexuality, and who really isn't. So if it comes to that point, I like sometimes I'll just offer the RTT session, the transformational therapy session, saying like, hey, I know you feel like you're ready for this, but something's feeling like it's really in the way. I'm sensing some resistance. Let's just go into the subconscious mind. I'll check in with you in 3 weeks and then we can go from there. So there's always, no matter where you start, there's always a path to go really deep into regaining sexual fulfillment and pleasure, right?
So yes to all of this, and kind of piggybacking on whether it's resistance or whatever's. So sovereignty, I said this word earlier. The definition just is supreme power or authority. I even put it in the comments, just so we understand what that means, because to me that's really, really powerful. It's supreme power or authority with not only our sexuality, but then you're challenging something that we know to be a thing in American sexuality is then spirituality or religion, right? So we know that they're different, or rather, we have definitions that they're different, spirituality versus religion. Irregardless, that's what we're trying to marry. Like that's the basis of a lot of people, and that's the barrier. So how can you, I don't know if there's a technique thing that you regularly find yourself doing, or a exercise, I don't know. How do you help people legit then? Really, you're saying I'm supposed to be powerful in my sexuality. If that's not part of my vocabulary, I don't even know what that means.
Right.
Right? I have an idea of what I might look like, powerful or in authority of myself and of my body and of what I want. However, we know that that's a problem for a lot of folks. How
Yeah.
do you help with that? Like, that's just gate one, right? Let's learn the premises, but that's where it all is.
Absolutely. I think that it's really about meeting yourself where you're at. Because when we're
You mean
constantly
not judging? You mean not telling myself that I'm terrible and ridiculous? That's what you mean?
like that's yucky. Like you're just reinstilling the trauma that is all underneath, right? And I think that's where people get things mixed up, is we're constantly pushing to heal, pushing to have the best orgasm, pushing to find, I don't know, the newest toy or the newest thing, or we're pushing to embodiment. We're and it's not about that. It's about what's in between. That's authentic tantra. Tantra in general is about riding the wave. It's not just about riding the wave of your pleasure, regardless of sexual pleasure or not. It's about riding the wave of where you're at, the ups, the downs, and acknowledging that it will never end. It's never going to be, consciousness in and of itself. I do not believe it's that you're living in some bliss world floating above your body. It's that we experience ecstasy, whether we're in pleasure or pain. The lines start to be blurred because we've done the work through our subconscious and our nervous system and all of that on a not just a psychological level, but like on a primal level too. Even through our DNA, we have power to change our DNA through pleasure as well. That we start to view the world through a different lens, right?
Ooh.
So something that occurred to us 2 years ago that just like flung us out of the water for 3 years and we can't stop thinking about it, right? Say that were to happen again, but now your body is in alignment, your nervous system is in alignment, right? You have the tools to work through it. So it's not that pain doesn't happen, it's that you can work through it in a means that still overlaps with pleasure and joy and living a fulfilling life, right?
That was really, really big what you just said. And I don't know, like just thinking about from a capacity perspective, what you just said. Can you say your last 2 sentences? Do you remember what they were? Can you say them again? It was about the lens. Oh, go ahead.
Something along the lines that we can experience pleasure and pain simultaneously, but because we have that different view, that different lens in which we're viewing our world, that we can still layer pleasure and fulfillment on top, right?
That needs to be on loop somewheres. Like, let it sink in. I'm serious. Like, really, it's yes.
Put that on the t-shirt.
It needs to be somewhere to contemplate, to meditate, to marinate, all those M's. You have also, Ava, thank you so much for sharing all of your stuffs. This is good. This is such good. Embodiment. You've used that word multiple times. For someone like me, or the background that I have even, I love the idea of this. I love that. I know that it's where we need to work towards, or that I would like to work towards. I know the traumas and whatnot. That's a really big effing word, not just for me, but for a lot of people. How do you do that? And I know that's a really big question. However, that's a really terrifying idea to embody. That means I might have to feel everything. Does that mean I have to forgive? Does that mean I have to reconnect with those traumas? What does that mean? What does that mean? And how do I get there?
Oh, that is a very, very big question, because we already come into this world, especially those who have a lineage that was extremely oppressed. The DNA, like just through our DNA alone, we already come into this world with some murkiness, with some generational trauma, with ancestral trauma, with past life trauma. So there's always so much to work through. And you're right, when we live in a world where perhaps we still don't feel safe in our bodies, let alone our environment.
There you go. Yes.
That is extremely terrifying. So it's again starting to make your body feel like home again. Gently,
safety in the body.
Gently, easily giving yourself that space, right? And also acknowledging that that healing does not always have to be painful, long.
Yes, say that loud.
It doesn't. It does not always have to be so painful and long and and excruciating. It does not have to be that way.
Yes.
So that's
accept
again,
that, people. Hear it, own it.
The sexuality, the pleasure aspect, right?
Yes.
The pleasure aspect again. When we're constantly in a state every day, reminding ourselves, even in little ways, like, ooh, how can I make this moment a 10? If I can't make it a 10 because of my current situation, am I okay at an 8? At least my subconscious mind isn't like in the background really pulling out my awareness without me consciously being aware of it, right? So it's in those tiny, tiny ways that we start to rewire not just our subconscious, but our nervous system on a fundamental level. And it can be so simple. Until it just becomes part of your everyday where you're starting to build upon it, right? And it's not to say that's super easy, obviously not, but just the aspect of pleasure alone, it's like I much rather feel pleasure and heal in the process than just be in excruciating agony and not experiencing any pleasure at all, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Totally.
It makes sense for us to realize how sacred our body is.
Start there.
I don't think people realize that.
At all, actually. Did everybody get that? Yeah. Realize that your body is sacred? Yeah. That's a novel idea. And I'm laughing about that. It's not funny on how many people that I talk to that it couldn't be further from the opposite, right? Like how many people, so many, are taught everything contradictory to that. And how do we then teach? And I know how it's consistency and it's showing up with the information, but it's teaching. You are sacred. We are sacred. There is a right to sovereignty. Just even starting with those basics that you're allowed to have this. You're allowed to have authority over your body and yourself, and you get to say what you want, when, and how.
Your birthright.
Yes. How do you is there a if you what is my question? What would be a good question for people to ask themselves to kick off their own journey? Or is there a something that one could try do tonight, or ask themselves and then see if they need more information or want more information?
Yeah. I would say ask yourself the question, am I truly fulfilled with my pleasure experience, or am I just settling?
Am I truly fulfilled with my pleasure experience? What should a pleasure experience look like then? Right?
Yeah, obviously, it's not just sexual based. A lot of times when we hear the word pleasure, we're like, oh, pleasure equals sex, penetrative sex to be exact, right? And that's totally untrue, right? Our pleasure experience can be made up of so many different things. To give you, I guess, more context, we have like 4 different forms of pleasure. We have sexual pleasure, we have spiritual pleasure, we have emotional pleasures, and then we have physical or sensual pleasures, right? So, asking yourself, how much pleasure am I actually allowing myself? Or, looking back on, oh, I'm only experiencing emotional pleasures, right? I wonder why that is. Get curious with yourself, right? It's not about breaking it down and saying, oh, something's wrong with you, but it's about getting curious with your relationship to pleasure. And if you have any aversion to different forms of pleasure, for example, okay? I guess I can give a few examples of those forms of pleasure just to make it a little bit more understandable.
Yes, keep going. That was really good, really helpful with the 4 different types of pleasure. And to ask self, am I really good or allowing 1 or 2, but then why not the others? And not judging, but being curious to understand self. Yes, please keep going.
Yeah. So, for example, physical or sensual pleasure, things like massage, things like, I don't know, going in a really hot bath because it feels good on your body, right? Giving yourself that nourishment. Another one for emotional or mental pleasure, right? Reading a book that really stimulates your mind, gets your creative juices flowing, right? Even like a Netflix show that like actually is filling you up that is an emotional pleasure, right? Sexual, then sexual fulfillments or sexual pleasure. Obviously, that's pretty standard, but there's different forms of sexual pleasure that goes along with that, right? Are you just relying on your partner for sexual pleasure, or are you taking time for self pleasure, self cultivation, and masturbation? Do you have an aversion to that, right? Even if you're in your relationship, which a lot of people do.
Yes, they do. And I think it tends to be more with a partner, certainly with a partner, than by themselves. Like, to masturbate in front of their partner for a lot of people is just absolutely, you might as well go have sex out in public. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Right. And this is with your partner. So, yes,
Yeah.
that's a huge thing for sure. So, real quick, Ava, we're at the 30-minute. Do you need to leave? Do you want to hang out if you've got somewhere to be? Because we could ask more questions or we can wrap it up. So I just want to be mindful of your time.
Thank you. Yeah, I can be here for about 15 more minutes.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for that. I did then have a question, but I forgot it already. So it was along the lines.
Oh, and I forgot
pleasure.
to say
Good.
that spiritual pleasure. Obviously, that's things like a meditation practice. Are you connecting with your pure consciousness outside of outside of the external stimuli and things like that? What makes you feel really connected to source, right? And that can be so many things.
Yes. It was about this pleasure idea and the different things that we can do. And we were talking about movie, reading, what fills your tank, experiencing all forms of pleasure. I can't think of what it was right this second. It's okay. It'll come to me.
Put your website up there.
Yes. For how we can reach you. So we need, it was something about, you were bringing up, this is what I also really like about this tradition as far as tantric is concerned with the Tibetan tantric, is that you used alchemy. First of all, you said Tibetan alchemy, which really got my ears, and I'm super excited about that. There again, it's talking about incorporating, the whole of people, the whole of nature, all of this stuff. What do you do, or how do you help someone connect to pleasure, registering that they're actually having pleasure? Because there's a bunch of reasons, diet, mental stuffs, trauma stuffs, of course, that would then lower someone's pleasure centers, right? Like they can't even experience pleasure. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, these sorts of things that can play into that. Which question do I want first? I guess it would be, how do we help someone identify that that's the issue? We'll start there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what comes to me in terms of working with the Tibetan 5 elements in particular is that it's really unique because we're working directly with the energy body. And we believe, any type of ailment, anything showing up in our physical body is a result of an imbalance, a blockage, a breakage in the energy body somewhere. So when we're working with the elements, I always begin with fire, because that's at our core. That is our sexual center. It governs orgasm. It governs our genitals. It governs electrical impulses right through the body. And also there's different qualities to it. It's magnetizing. There's passion about fire, right? So it really amps up. It amps us up. It ignites that space, because for many of us, we live from the waist up. And the only time we ever think about our genitals is when we're engaged in sexual activity, right? And our sexual energy is not just, it's not just reserved for sex. Our sexual energy is what ignites us. It is what brings it. It's literally our life force, right? It's our life force. So we come into
you
this.
might have just pushed some buttons. Yeah, you just said sexual energy is the life force, and
Yeah.
that might have just pushed some buttons for some folks. So and I love it. Yes, I agree. Keep going. But I just wanted to laugh about that because some people are like, wait, what? No, no, I'll have
Yeah,
no parts.
and again, when I say sexual energy, I don't mean like sexual penetration, sexual
Yes.
pleasure. I mean that we have the ability to harness that power. And think about this, right? To give you some more context, um, we come into this world through orgasm, right?
Yes.
So it is us on a fundamental level.
Yeah.
So, and also in
Hmm.
Tibetan Tantric Buddhism,
It's us at a
every
fundamental level. Sorry, I had to repeat it. Go ahead.
yeah. And in Tibetan Buddhism, we also believe that every orgasm is a glimpse of enlightenment. So we have the ability to
Mm.
harness our sexual energy, our orgasmic energy, even,
Mm.
whether it's through orgasm or indirectly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for holistic healing, basically, for holistic healing on so many different levels. So from that space, that alone is going to start to shake things up for people so that they actually start to feel more sensation, like physical sensation. Maybe they feel more emotional sensation, more emotional capacity as well. And then they get to develop what their pleasure means to them over time.
Mm.
So it's going to change. Our pleasure
Yes.
will be in a constant state of change.
There's
Um,
so many good things in that too.
and I like to just give this last example of we have kind of a system or a loop that where healing happens, right? So, if um, for example, if someone is having a numb area inside their vagina, right? And they're just like totally used to it, right? But
Mhm.
because of the tantra practices, they're like, oh, like that area actually is numb, right? There's something that happens where when we're working with the energy body, we can go from numbness to pain to
Mhm.
irritation and then to fully functioning. But it can
Mm.
actually loop back through. It can go back to pain and then back to fully functioning again if it needs to. So again, like healing is not linear. It's that our
Mhm.
pleasure centers, our pleasure capacity are constantly in a state of change. And to be in that flow, that's what Tantra is also really about, to be in that state of flow and knowing in real time what is happening.
Knowing in real time what is happening. This is such good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, being aware of it, being self-aware, you know, back to the sovereignty, you know,
Absolutely.
empowerment.
What is it's going to be different for everybody, but what is like the basic step one? What is the thing that you repeat with everyone all the time just because it's the thing that we all need to know to be able to have the jump off, to be able to work with you and all of that?
hmm Going back to the subconscious reframing, that's normally what I start with for the majority of the time, to really just get our subconscious mind on board, because our body will be more willing to open and bring in
Mhm.
all of the good stuff, all of the tools, all of the major transformations that are about to take place through our time together. So that is a place that I personally love to start with because I get to really go deep with someone. I mean, these sessions are, I'll do a whole hour long intake, and then I'll do, the session itself is over 2 hours sometimes. And then they get a personal recording that they get to listen to reinstill what exactly it is that they want to be experiencing. So, for example, if someone is coming to me with a sexual dysfunction or a sexual fear or sexual anxiety, all of these things are so real and so frequent in our Western society that, again, often it's stemming from a subconscious belief pattern that is creating this stagnation in the first place. So that oftentimes gives them the really beautiful push that they need to really dive in. And I really love doing those sessions because, again, we go super deep into what is really going on in the subconscious mind. And that's a lot of fun. So
Yeah. We think so.
They don't. We do.
People like us think so.
after
Yes,
the fact, it's like that was the best thing ever. Yeah.
Yes. Then it becomes fun. But in the beginning, we just seem like a bunch of, torturers or doing this to me.
Do you reiterate to them that it's a journey, what they're doing, and sometimes in that journey that it might not happen that day, but the following day they're in a better place. That just because they've done all the work with you doesn't mean that they won't have their challenges down the road.
Absolutely. And, I'll even see this once in a while, like after some time together, even after a first session, like all of this gunk can still start to come up, like memories and weird sensations. And they're just like, why am I feeling this? Like, I thought I was supposed to feel better. But that's actually a good sign.
Yes.
That is a major, beautiful, wonderful sign that that stagnant energy is now making its way out. And it doesn't mean that you have to identify with it. It doesn't mean that you have to understand it. It's like when we take a shit, we just like flush the toilet, right?
Yes.
We don't often like dissect it. Like sometimes that's nice.
I mean, I have, but
when we're going into the subconscious, like sometimes I meant to say when we go into the subconscious, it can be nice to dissect and like, this is what happened. You get the gist, right?
You were talking about sifting through poop.
But it doesn't.
I heard you. I heard you.
But it often doesn't matter that, all of this gunk is coming out and we have to really get in there and understand every single piece. That can be really exhausting. So.
I agree. This has been amazing,
Awesome.
Ava. Thank you so much. Would love to have you back and talk more. And I have lots of questions, and I'm sure there's more for sure that you would be able to get into. We do have a banner across the bottom here that has your flame within tantra.com. Is there other contact? How else do people get a hold of you? If they want to work with you, are you taking new people? Your infos?
Yeah, my Instagram is probably the best way to talk with me in real time. Facebook is good too, but on Instagram, I do post a lot of really good content. So if you just want to follow me for fun, like that's great too. My Instagram is Ava, so AVA .Ashe, so it's ASHE, and that's where you can find me on Facebook as well. A lot of information is on that link below as well through my website. You can learn a little bit more about me. Again, everything that I offer is really tailored to your unique desires and goals. So if you don't see what you want to, if you don't see the exact thing you're looking for on my website, just come to me and we can chat. I'm also, just a quick thing, that I'm also moving to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So if you happen to be in the area, get in contact with me. I also do in person, but I work with anyone all over the world.
In person and online.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. I will be messaging you my darn self and chatting and stuff. Again, thank you so much for your wisdom and what you're offering to the world, and helping to minimize suffering and expand pleasure, and helping people have the tools to live this life the way I feel that we were meant to. Enjoy and actually wanting to be here, right? Thank you all, friends, for joining us. I'm going to put this other banner up real quick for our next podcast. That's the correct, right? July 12th, 7 p.m. We're going to be talking about the benefits of exercise and sex with Melissa. She's a Pilates instructor, KNT Obsessions article writer, and personal trainer. So she will be with us again, July 12th, 7 p.m. Today, we have had Ava Ashe with flamewithintantra.com talking to us about Tibetan Tantra, understanding what that actually means, that sexuality and spirituality can live in the same place, and they are the same thing. Like, they're not separate. Isn't that interesting? So many good nuggets, so many good things. Check her out. follow us. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, friends. And thank you again for joining us. Until next time.
Bye.